Korea to Germany. From Alaska to Puerto Rico. All over the world, the men and women of your Army are on the alert to defend our nation, you, the American people, against aggression. This is the big picture.
Welcome to the big picture. I'm Captain Carl Zimmerman, here to tell you more about your United States Army. In the past programs of our Big Picture series, we've told you what makes a soldier, how he fights, and all of the teamwork that goes into an Army in action. It's been the story of men. But the Army today is the story of women, too. Skirted soldiers who fill a definite need in the organization of the Army.
When America thinks of its Army today, it thinks of men standing guard at the cornerstones of freedom. Along the unfamiliar streets of Europe to the muddy mountain trails of Korea, the feet of American soldiers are marching. And marching with our fighting Army today is a different kind of soldier. The skirted soldiers, the Women's Army Corps, the Army Nurse Corps, and the Women's Medical Specialist Corps. American women in uniform, playing a vital part in our Army today. Just as they did in the war, American women are again in service, strengthening American defense. The role of women in our Army today is described by General Matthew B. Ridgway.
Maintaining an army overseas is a tremendous business. It requires that we have adequate forces available to meet any situation which may arise. And these forces must be fed, housed, paid, and medically cared for, so that they retain the high degree of efficiency which always has characterized the United States Army. Just as you will find our women essential in successful organizations throughout our homeland, so will you find women in uniform at home and abroad, rendering conspicuously fine service equally essential to the successful accomplishment of the Army's many varied missions. In my headquarters and in the various sub-commands, we have members of the Women's Army Corps, enlisted and officers, handling hundreds of essential tasks, from routine administrative work to highly skilled technical and professional duties.
On the Korean front, a combat infantryman fires a gun. This WAC inspected it back in the States. Tanks push ahead. They are fast and powerful. They were tested by this WAC. Wherever the Army is stationed, women in uniform are there too, working with the soldiers and for them. They continue a tradition which began nearly 200 years ago with a woman called Molly Pitcher. She was the wife of an artilleryman in the Revolutionary War and took his place at the gun when he was killed, saving it from falling into enemy hands. George Washington appointed Molly Pitcher a sergeant for her bravery and placed her on the list of half-pay officers for life. The same tradition was carried on in the Civil War by a woman named Clara Barton, who devoted herself to the care of the sick and wounded soldiers. She was a war nurse and later founded the International Red Cross. It was such pioneers as these who set the pattern for women in our Army. America began to grow, and women were advancing too. World War I found them ready to take man's place on the home front, ready to play a necessary role in defense. Women were at war, playing any role where there was a need. Aiding the sick, tending the wounded, women were there on the battlefields, heroic nurses fighting not to kill, but to save. And when the war ended, women proudly marched with their men in the victory parade. In peace, they fought for a greater share of our government's responsibilities and won the privilege of voting. By achievement, they set new standards of endeavor, but their greatest test was yet to come. Pearl Harbor. Uncle Sam's men went to war again, and nurses went along with them. This was a different kind of world, where strange-sounding names became datelines for death and heroism. Corregidor, Bataan, Bougainville. Men were wounded, and nurses were still there in the field, helping them. Many nurses won the Silver Star decoration. Others fell into Japanese hands, but were rescued and returned to duty again, for the need of them was great. War began to drain America's manpower away from their desks. Men were fighting, not manning typewriters. But the number of troop movements grew. It took a lot of paperwork to win a war. There were a lot of jobs for which men could not be spared. And 6 months after Pearl Harbor, the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps was born. The Army no longer stood alone. Pallas Athena, goddess of war and achievement, became the WAC insignia, a symbol of American women dedicated to defense. Across the country, women answered the call. They fell in behind the recruiting parades in fur coats and business suits. Now they had a role to play, an important role, filling a lot of jobs. Soon, the fur coats would be gone. They would be in uniform, proud and patriotic women who lead the way.